The decision to leave was taken by the British people, not on a party political basis. The argument back in this House always gravitates around party politics. Actually, the decision in the referendum was taken by the British people in their individual homes at breakfast or the night before. They sat round and they talked to one another and said, what are we going to do tomorrow? And they made a decision. When they made that decision, and then they found that Remainer MPs, whether on the opposition benches or even on our own benches, were repudiating the decision that the individual voters had made, whether they came from Labour constituencies, Liberal Democrat, or more likely Conservative constituencies. They deeply, deeply resented the fact that they had decided themselves with their families to go to the ballot box to vote to leave the European Union in that referendum, and then they found, to their intense annoyance, fury and their disappointment, that their Member of Parliament used the position that they had in this House to frustrate the decision that they had taken. That is why so many of the Labour Members of Parliament have now left the benches that they held before, simply because in Labour Leave marginals in particular, what people did not appreciate in this House was the fact that as a result of, for example, of the European coal steel community and the massive subsidies that were given to other countries in places north of Coventry, in coal and steel communities, that those people had been deprived of their livelihoods because of the collapse of the steel and coal industry, much of which was driven by the anti-competitive nature of the European Coal Steel Community framework. And if you were to take a map of the United Kingdom and superimpose upon it the coal and steel communities, you would see a very similar, a very direct correlation between the decisions that were taken in the general election when they drove out Labour members of Parliament because they were not doing what the people who were voting wanted them to do. They wanted to leave the European Union, and the Labour members of Parliament who were driven out refused to allow them to be as national and as determined as they wanted to be in terms of their own constituency and their national interest. That is where the problem lies, and the Labour Party just simply cannot bring itself, even now, to understand the feelings of the people north of Coventry and in other parts of the country who found that their own Member of Parliament had let them down. And there was a reason for that referendum, and it's very simple. It was quite clear that the collusion between the two front benches in 1992-93 would lead to us having to stay in the European Union and to accept the Maastricht Treaty. That is what the referendum was all about. So we now have a huge opportunity in a completely new environment where we take control of our own laws in this House in accordance with proper democratic principles to create a new global trading relationship, to ensure that we are able to govern ourselves, but also to work in cooperation with other countries on our own terms, not on the terms that were laid down by the European Union. And I look to the Secretary of State in the full knowledge that he and the Prime Minister and any other ministers involved in developing policies on the European Union over the next year or two will do it on our terms and conditions and not on those imposed upon us by the European Union. So this is a great moment in our democratic history, and this is furthermore a great tribute to the British people who listened to the arguments that were presented to preserve their democracy. As I have said, and I will never apologise for saying this, because the decisions that were taken were for democratic reasons. That is why we have ended up with our sovereignty back again, which we abdicated in 1971 when we gradually gave up the veto, and now we will be able to govern ourselves. And I think it's a great tribute to the British people and also to the members of Parliament who have been returned in this election, that they will, through the majority that we've now got and with our Prime Minister, guarantee that we will have a bright and an effective future for this country.